Maria Thompson clutched a folded flag to her chest, her knees nearly buckling under the weight of loss. She expected a quiet service, a handful of local soldiers paying respects to her son. Instead, over 200 uniformed men and women stood in rigid formation, eyes straight ahead, hands ready to salute. Then a general walked up the aisle and handed Maria a letter, one that would change everything she thought she knew about her son's final days. It was a moment no one present would ever forget. Before we dive into Maria's story, I need to warn you, this one's going to hit different. If you've ever lost someone who meant everything to you, or if you want to understand what real sacrifice looks like, you're going to want to stay for this entire story. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because some stories change how you see the world. Let me tell you about Maria Thompson. She's in her early 50s, living in one of those quiet Ohio towns where everyone knows everyone, and nothing much exciting ever happens. But Maria's life has been anything but quiet. When her son Ethan was just 5 years old, she lost her husband in a factory accident. Just like that, she went from being part of a family to being everything. Mom, dad, breadwinner, homework helper, the whole deal. Picture this woman working double shifts at the local diner, coming home exhausted, but still sitting at the kitchen table helping her kid with math homework until midnight. But here's what made Maria special. She never let the hardship make her bitter. She raised Ethan with this simple philosophy: you stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves, and you always come home honest. No matter what happened during the day, no matter how tough things got, you tell the truth and you do right by people. Ethan grew up watching his mom live by those words. He saw her give her last $20 to a neighbor whose heat got shut off. He watched her work Christmas morning so her coworker could be home with her kids. This kid learned what character looked like by watching his mom demonstrate it every single day. So when Ethan graduated high school and told his mom he was joining the army, it wasn't really a surprise. He said he wanted to pay for college later, sure, but mostly he said he wanted to do something bigger. Maria knew exactly what he meant. He wanted to stand up for people, just like she'd taught him. For 4 years, they talked every week. Ethan would call from whatever base he was stationed at, telling her about his training, his friends, how he was saving money for school. Maria would fill him in on town gossip, send care packages full of his favorite cookies, and count the days until his next leave. But then Maria learned the difference between missing someone and losing them forever. It was a Tuesday morning in October when Maria heard the knock. Not the casual rap of a neighbor or the quick knock of a delivery driver. This was different, formal, measured, the kind of knock that makes your stomach drop before you even open the door. 2 soldiers stood on her porch in their dress uniforms, faces grave, shoulders squared. Maria knew immediately. Every military mom's worst nightmare was standing right there on her welcome mat. "Mrs. Thompson," the older one said, "we regret to inform you that your son, Private First Class Ethan Thompson, was killed in action in Afghanistan." The words hit her like a physical blow. Roadside bombing, minimal details, rehearsed condolences that these men had probably given too many times before. They promised her a service with full military honors, asked about her preferences for the arrangements. Maria nodded through it all in this weird fog, like she was watching it happen to someone else. She signed papers, answered questions, but inside she was just screaming. Her boy, her baby, the kid who used to climb into her bed during thunderstorms, gone. After they left, she sat in her kitchen staring at the folded pamphlets they'd given her about military funerals and grief counseling. She packed a simple black dress, the only one she owned, and prepared herself for what she assumed would be a small service. Maybe a handful of local veterans, some soldiers she'd never met paying their respects to another fallen comrade. She had no idea what was actually coming. The morning of the funeral, Maria rode in the car behind the hearse, staring out the window at the Ohio countryside rolling by. Fall was just starting to turn the leaves, and it struck her as cruel that the world could be so beautiful on the worst day of her life. As they turned into the National Cemetery, Maria spotted something that made her breath catch. Soldiers. Lots of them. At first, She thought it was just the standard honor guard. You know, the 7-man detail that fires the rifles and folds the flag. But as the car got closer, she realized the line of soldiers stretched way beyond what she was expecting. Row after row of men and women in dress uniforms, standing at perfect attention. "Ma'am," the driver said quietly, glancing at her in the rearview mirror, "word about your son spread through Fort Stewart and some of the other bases. These soldiers, they all volunteered to be here. Nobody ordered them to come. They signed up on their own time, used their own leave days." Maria's throat tightened. Ethan was just a private first class. Not an officer, not someone famous, just a regular soldier doing his job. Why would so many people come for him? As they walked toward the gravesite, Maria clutched that folded flag to her chest, tears streaming down her face. The magnitude of it hit her all at once. Over 200 soldiers had traveled from who knows where to honor her son. When they reached Ethan's final resting place, something incredible happened. A hush swept through the massive crowd. You could hear boots shifting on the grass. And then nearly 200 hands rose in perfect unison. The salute was crisp, synchronized, and they held it until Maria's shoulders began to shake with sobs. This wasn't just ceremony or protocol. This was brotherhood. This was family saying goodbye to family. From the back of the crowd stepped this tall man in full dress blues, his chest heavy with ribbons and medals, 2 stars on his collar, a general. Maria had never seen a general in real life, and here one was, walking directly toward her. But instead of staying distant and formal like you might expect, this general knelt down right there in front of Maria's chair so their eyes were level. In his hands was a sealed envelope, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle. "Ma'am," he said, "your son left this with my office before his final deployment. He said it was only to be opened and delivered if he couldn't give it to you himself." Maria's hands were shaking so badly that the general had to help her steady them as she took the envelope. Her name was written on the front in Ethan's familiar handwriting, the same scrawl that used to leave her notes on the refrigerator. Inside was a single sheet of paper, and as Maria read it, you could see her face transform. "Mom," it started, "if you're reading this, I guess things went sideways over here. Please don't be sad for too long. I was exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what you taught me to do." He wrote about his platoon, how they were just kids, really. Homesick kids who were scared but trying to be brave. Kids who laughed through the terror because they had to, who became brothers because survival depended on it. "You always told me that family is who you stand up for," Ethan had written. "Well, Mom, over here, I found more family than I ever dreamed possible. These guys aren't just my unit, they're my brothers. And I'd rather die protecting my brothers than live knowing I let them down." Then came the line that hit Maria like a physical blow. "I hope you're proud of the man you raised, because everything good in me came from you." Even the general's voice cracked as Maria pressed that letter to her chest, sobbing. Around them, 200 soldiers stood in perfect silence, witnessing a mother's heartbreak and heal at the same time. After the formal ceremony ended, something beautiful happened. Dozens of soldiers, men and women who had served with Ethan, waited in line to talk to Maria. Not because they were ordered to, but because they wanted to. Some left coins on Ethan's headstone, others pressed small unit patches into Maria's hands, but most importantly, they shared stories. A corporal from Alabama told her how Ethan always volunteered for the worst guard shifts so other guys could call home to their families. "Your boy never complained," he said. "He'd just say, 'My mom taught me to look out for people and take the duty.'" A sergeant from Texas described how Ethan could make everyone laugh during the scariest moments. "We'd be on convoy, everyone tense as hell, and Ethan would start doing impressions of our drill sergeant. Had us cracking up when we should have been terrified." A young woman, a medic, told Maria how Ethan once gave up his seat on a transport so she could get back to base in time for an emergency call. He walked 15 miles in the heat because he said saving lives was more important than his comfort. Story after story, Maria began to see her son through the eyes of the people he'd served with. Every tale was different, but they all had the same theme: Ethan standing up for others, putting his brothers and sisters first, living by the values she'd taught him at that kitchen table back in Ohio. But the last soldier in line was the one who broke her heart and put it back together at the same time. This young sergeant, couldn't have been more than 22, approached Maria with tears already streaming down his face. His voice was shaking as he introduced himself. "Ma'am," he said, "I need to tell you what really happened that day. I need you to know what your son did." He explained that they were on patrol, checking a road for IEDs, improvised explosive devices. It was routine, something they'd done hundreds of times before. But Ethan spotted something the others had missed. Wires, barely visible, but there. "Your boy saw it first," the sergeant said, his voice cracking. "He shouted for everyone to get back, but I was too close, too slow. So Ethan, he pushed me, hard, sent me flying backward just as the device went off." The sergeant had to stop talking for a moment, overcome by emotion. "Ma'am, your son took the brunt of that explosion. He saved my life, and probably 3 or 4 others. The last thing he said was, 'Tell my mom I kept my promise. Tell her I came home honest.'" Maria pulled this young man into her arms right there in the cemetery, both of them crying. Through her tears, she whispered, "Then you promise me something. Promise me you'll live enough for both of you. You'll go home to your family, and you'll live a life that honors what he gave you." The sergeant nodded, unable to speak, and Maria knew that somewhere, somehow, Ethan was proud. In the weeks that followed, something amazing happened in Maria's little Ohio town. Neighbors started leaving casseroles on her porch. Local veterans, men who'd served in Vietnam, Korea, even World War II, began stopping by. They fixed her front steps without being asked, painted her fence, made sure her car was running properly. It was like Ethan's sacrifice had created this quiet bond that tied the whole community together. People understood that this woman had given her only child to something bigger than all of them, and they wanted to take care of her the way she'd taken care of everyone else for so many years. Maria framed that letter and placed it above her mantle, right next to the folded flag. Every morning, she'd read a line or two, letting Ethan's words steady her for the day ahead. "Family is who you stand up for," became more than just advice. It echoed in her kitchen, her garden, in her very bones. On the first anniversary of Ethan's death, Maria drove back to the cemetery. When she reached his headstone, she found fresh flowers, new coins, unit patches from soldiers she'd never met. Men and women who had served with her son were still looking out for him, still honoring his memory. She knelt down, pressed her palm to the cool stone, and whispered, "They're all still looking out for you, baby, just like you looked out for them." Stories like Maria's remind us that heroes aren't just people who do extraordinary things. They're people who live by extraordinary values every single day. Ethan learned to stand up for others by watching his mom do it first. That's the real lesson here. The way we live our lives echoes through the people we love, sometimes in ways we never imagine. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to remember that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Hit that like button to honor families like Maria's. Subscribe for more real stories about real heroes, and I'll see you in the next one. Remember, family is who you stand up for. Make sure you're standing up for yours.